Hello and welcome to the West Yorkshire Football Show. I'm Stephen Brown and I'm delighted to say joining us for this Leeds United special, it is the BBC Sports Adam Pope. Adam, welcome along, mate.
Hi, Stephen. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks for joining us on the channel. Lots to talk about Leeds United stuff. We're going to get to present day Leeds United, but we can't start anywhere else other than an absolutely fascinating story that's broken today, a little bit earlier. I absolutely love the Revie era. I love that era of football as well, the characters, the stories. Obviously, that was Leeds at the zenith as well. But a remarkable story where you've stumbled across a letter that seems to indicate that Don Revie was very, very close to joining Everton. In 1972, this would have been, wouldn't it, after Leeds won the FA Cup? Was it that year or 73?
It was 73, Stephen. Yeah, it was. After just lost the FA Cup final to Sunderland. And finished third in the league, which by their standards was pretty below par. And then, of course, we're about to lose the Winners' Cup final as well. So they fell between three stools, Stephen. A very critical time, as it turns out, for the club.
Yeah, if nobody's read it or seen anything about it, yeah, I do search. Just search Pope's timeline. You'll get a link to the article and everything. But do you want to just give us a little brief outlay of what happened and how you've stumbled across this information?
Yeah, so it's not a secret, Steve, that Don Revie was linked with Everton closely in the sort of May, June 73. You know, that is out there. What wasn't out there was the sort of exact details of the contract and, you know, whether one had been put in front of him. There's all sorts of, you know, wild tales that he was being offered this, that, and the other, you know, 250 grand and, you know, which is a lot of money then, is now, and 50K tax-free sort of bonus sort of stuff or signing on fee. So what it is, I grew up as a Liverpool on the Wirral, and when my mum remarried, she remarried a guy called George Watts, who was worked for the Littlewoods organisation, whose owner, John Moores, was the sort of owner-chairman of Everton as well. So my stepfather had been, before I met him, had been sort of director and chairman at Everton for a bit, and then was on the board and obviously worked for Littlewoods. And with that, you sort of did your duties with Everton as well. So and I've had quite a long connection prior to that with Everton as well, was, you know, sort of grandfathers and dads and all this sort of stuff. But my stepfather just worked with them. So he had this filing cabinet, Steve, and he died in 88. He was quite a bit older than my mum. And one of his fellow directors, Keith Tamlin, who's not long passed away, actually, was his sort of solicitor who handled his sort of affairs when he died. That filing cabinet gets emptied out, and I thought everything had gone in it in 88, completely gone, you know, sort of thing. And as it turns out, when my mum passed last year, we were clearing out everything, and I went through every file, every bit of paperwork. And like most mums of a certain age, they like to keep everything. And there's all the usual sort of household stuff, you know, house insurance, policy stuff that was out of date, receipts. Stuff behind this, right at the very back, was this manila file. And I picked it up and there started reading, and it says, you know, like contract or offer between Everton Football Club and Don Revie of 3 Chimneys, Sandmoor Drive, Leeds, and started going through it. And yeah, there was all the details were there of what they offered him, which was £15,500 a year on a 7-year contract, Steve, which equates to about £250,000 now, I'd say.
Wow.
So yeah, and then the rest sort of unfurled from there. So that's obviously it's a quirky thing with me growing up there and being
unbelievable, really, isn't it?
and not knowing a thing about this. So nobody knew it was there, other than my stepfather, who'd been long gone, and even he probably thought it would have gone anyway. So, and then for us to look back and use it to sort of paint the story again, but with this quirky part to it and this sliding doors moment in English football and Leeds' history and Everton's history, then yeah, it was very, very bizarre, really.
Yeah, absolutely remarkable. Because I think I'd heard or kind of read stuff a little bit about there being other clubs interested. I didn't know it was to that extent, and obviously it sounds as if it got really, really close. I mean, it's a sliding doors moment. What do you think made him stay? Obviously, in the article it explains, obviously, you know, we know that Leeds at that time, and they've often talked about the Revie boys, it was like a family and that kind of thing. And there may have been other aspects, you know, the salary getting out, that kind of thing. But what do you think ultimately it was that kept Revie at Leeds during that time?
Well, we've done a sort of documentary on it as well, to just put online or run on Radio Leeds as well on Wednesday night. And there seems to be a few things. Firstly, so the rumours are out there that this contract's a big deal, you know, and he goes on to say, look, it was the best, you know, it was the closest I've been to leaving. So clearly, financially, it was there maybe to set him and his family for life. So whether Leeds came back and counter-offered or not, we don't know, and it might just be the ties that bind, which he says in an interview not long after it all got settled, that he says that, you know, that was a lot to do with it, you know, that it was the club that gave him his start, and that the lads had a lot to do with it as well. And interestingly, just before the Cup Winners' Cup final in '73, which they went on to lose, he says, even if we lose, we've had an amazing season and there's more to come from these guys, he says, because some of them had written them off. Yeah. And as we know, he stays and they go and win the league and make the European Cup the following year, by which time, obviously, he's gone to England. One of the other things that was really interesting in it was that whilst all this was going on into May and stroke into June, bear in mind the contract said that he was meant to start on June the 1st at Everton. There was this weird thing where he comes back from Greece having lost in ludicrous circumstances. Clearly, there was something amiss, as they were sort of denied what they should have won against Milan in Greece, when all the Greek fans were cheering them, because it was clearly like there'd been some, let's just say, dodgy officiating. The guy did get banned for life eventually afterwards, not that match, but Christos Mikos did get banned. He comes back from Greece and then goes back out on holiday to Greece. And during that time, he, in the Commons, and this is at a time when there's rising inflation, bombs going off in Belfast and in London, you know, during the Troubles, you know, real industrial and political unrest. And Dennis Skinner, the Beast from Bolsover, the MP, raises the subject of the Everton manager's salary in the House of Commons and says he's a Labour MP. It goes against the Tories' pay board, which says that you weren't meant to earn more than, I think it was £250 in your predecessor, and that this might break their pay board. So, of course, it was said that, well, we'll have to investigate this and speak to the clubs and blah, blah, blah. So that's on the 23rd of May. On the 24th of May, it's possible that Everton went out to Greece to try and sort of convince him to come one last time. There looks like there's some flights were booked. I found some literature to that effect. And then on the 25th of May, he rings Leeds and says, I'm staying. So was it the ties that bind? Was it a combination of that and the worry about a contract being illegal, maybe, if he'd gone to it after what was said in the comments, you know, a couple of days before? So there's lots of theories as to why. And I think, to be honest, he probably, you know, took it to his grave, did Don. But he did leave in the end. But at that point, if he had left, you do wonder whether, you know, Everton would have become the dominant force, definitely, in English football if he'd been at the helm.
Yeah. Do you think he would have been a success there? I mean, obviously his methods were so intertwined with Leeds. You know, he made Leeds what it was. Do you think he would have been able to do that again at Everton? I mean, what kind of state were Everton in around that time? I know they'd had a really bad season that particular year. I think they finished 17th or something, hadn't they? I mean,
that's right.
Was it a case they needed that kind of injection of someone of Revie's stature to kind of kick them on a bit?
Well, they'd had their most successful manager as well. Harry Catchick had been there for more than a decade, won 2 titles and an FA Cup, but he'd actually suffered a heart attack in '71, ironically, over the Pennines in Yorkshire. And so his health was failing the team, as you quite rightly said. You know, they were falling off. They'd sold Alan Ball, you know, the World Cup winner in '71. There was a bit of a shock move to Arsenal, but they still had a really good side. You know, Kendall and Harvey, with Colin and Harvey and Howard Kendall, part of the Holy Trinity midfield with Alan Ball, with you know, Joe Royle. You know, people will know from his managerial career, but was a great striker at the time. And then, even though Billy Bingham came in to take over, Northern Irishman, who'd been in Greece and with AEK Athens, had been a player at Everton, had made some good signings that in the '70s with Bob Latchford and players like that. and there were some really good homegrown players, Ronnie Goodless, Mike Lyons, but they were perennial underachievers in the 70s. And I think if Revie come in, he would not have stood for that. He would have brought the discipline and the professionalism that would have been required to turn what was sort of three fairly near, well, one very big near miss in terms of the championship in 75, two others later in the 70s. And then there was a League Cup final they lost to Villa after two replays. Dramatically lost late on, I think, in extra time and at Old Trafford. And you just think that he would have turned that tide for them. And eventually Everton declined, and it wasn't until Howard Kendall came in the early 80s, really, it took him a little while to get them going, that they recovered and became a really good team. But if you speak to like Ronnie Goodless, who was a winger trying to break into the first team at the time, he said, look, it's a big chance missed. If they've gone. Eddie Gray spoke to in the document. He said, yeah, if he's, he would have been a success there. They would have been the dominant force. Yeah. So I think there's no doubt he would have been a success.
Yeah, indeed. And it's kind of funny how it worked out as well, because obviously he goes to England, takes the England job on, and that ends in kind of a controversial situation, and kind of not obviously with Leeds fans. Obviously, he's always going to be beloved with Leeds fans, but I guess tarnished his reputation and whatnot, thereafter. And he didn't have another job, did he, in England? Obviously, sadly, passed away 1989 as well. So it's just funny how it works, isn't it? But it would have been fascinating if he'd have actually taken the job to see what he could have done. He might have had a bit more longevity kind of in the English game, because it was still, I think he was kind of mid-40s, wasn't he, at that point? So he was still really a young man in terms of managerial experience.
He wanted to be done by 55, I think. I mean, he had a deal with Leeds, and he was in a long contract with Leeds at the time. This was all going on in 73 with them. And then there was this consultancy option as well at the end of it. So he was really keen on making sure that he was done and out, if you like, by 55. As you say, he's in his mid-40s at this point. And, he talks as well, having made the decision, Steve, that to stay at Leeds, how much he'd said, I've put 12 years of my life before my family. Sometimes I've got to think of my family, myself, and us. And hence he thought, maybe going to Everton for, a new challenge, 7-year deal, that would have him sorted and done. But who knows whether the Leeds board thought, because they met I think it was the following Monday they were due to meet after he'd come back from his holiday, which was early June by this point, to sort it all out and make sure that everything was okay. Obviously, he said he was staying at that point, but whether they then sort of matched or up their existing offer to his deal, we'll never know. But he stayed for that year and had that amazing 29 match unbeaten run from the beginning of the season, which was a record for many, many, many years, wasn't it? It was levelled by Liverpool until Everton beat them, and then obviously Arsenal went on and did a whole season. So this incredible thing, and they won. They were such worthy champions. And he'd laid the gauntlet down, hadn't he? He said to him, I want you to go the whole season unbeaten. And Billy Bremner said, what, really, boss? Yeah. And,
they forgot about the cups, didn't they, as well? They kind of just, the FA Cup, the League Cup, it wasn't on the agenda, was it? It was all about the league, getting a league title. Because we probably should have had, 3 or 4 league titles at least from that team. I mean, runners up 5 or 6 times. I mean, the amount of stuff they didn't win, I mean, it's heartbreaking from a Leeds fan's point of view. You just think, oh my word, we could have, been so much higher up those charts, but still incredible.
Yes, they came second a lot, didn't they? Whenever you speak to the experts, but the fact they were always in the mix, I mean, it was incredible. I mean, I think the 65 seasons under the made, they come out the second division, they lose on goal average, wasn't it? I think to Manchester United, and then lose the FA Cup final that season in extra time to Liverpool, and then the madness of the 70 Cup final, which really they should have won. But they get it over the line 68 with the League Cup, win the title the next year, do win the FA Cup, and then obviously 73 things were just fell down, didn't they? Like they had done before in a few scenarios, but. And I wonder if you just felt, Steve, that was look, I'm stood there on the side of the pitch in Salonika. We've basically been denied what should have been another trophy by mad refereeing and officiating and whatever else, and EastEnders and things. I can't abandon these. I wonder if it was just that guttural really in the end. Maybe thought I need to stay.
Do you think later on? Do you think he may have regretted actually leaving Leeds at that point? Because obviously, recently, Terry Yorath, obviously, great Terry Yorath has passed away, but it did seem like there was maybe some new blood coming into the team. You had like Joe Jordan, Gordon McQueen. After kind of Bremner, Giles, Brigade, there seemed to be a few kind of new ones breaking through. I wonder if he ever kind of thought, oh, maybe I could have built like a second great team at Leeds.
I think firstly, by 73, he didn't think that the team that he'd built, I mean, he didn't buy that many players, did he? I mean, he all sort of, he schooled them himself, didn't he? For youngsters, if you like. It wasn't for buying big stars, so necessarily so, with the odd one. And I think he still felt it wasn't a time to break it up. And, he, for example, he wanted to take in Norman Hunter and Trevor Cherry to Everton if he'd taken it. He told them that. And if he was going to go, he was going to take it with him. By the year later, I wonder if he thought, maybe this is the time. Plus, it's the England job, biggest job in football, clearly. And he thinks maybe I don't want to break it up. And there is definitely a running theme with a lot of people when you speak to ex-players and journalists that have covered the period who said, I don't fancy breaking it up. However, there were other people coming through. There were other really stuck up. I mean, like you mentioned, Terry Yorath there. He was in that. He won the title that year with him. Played in the European Cup final, which was essentially was Revie's side, wasn't it? So there were a few there. And look, he could have built another side. There's no doubt about it. Certainly if he'd been backed. But as a coach and his coaching staff were brilliant at bringing players through. So if he'd stayed longer than that extra or that year before he went to England, I'm sure he would have built them into another successful side. But in the end, he went out, with a title winning and a great title that they won that year. They were such worthy champions. So but it must have been in the back of his mind that I don't want to wave these lads off, into the sunset, or Norman Hunter to Bristol City, and various others, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff. No, brilliant story. So any Leeds fans that haven't checked that out, please do, because it's absolutely classic. I know we've got a lot of old boys that watch the channel as well, so I'm sure they'll be interested in any stories about Revie as well. Just before we let you go then, Adam, just to kind of move on to the modern day, and Leeds United, it's Everton next Monday, actually, and it's going to be a fascinating one. Have you been over to the Hill Dickinson? Have you kind of experienced that?
I went for a test event against Bolton Wanderers. So it was like a 21s game, and it was only for 60 minutes. It was part of them getting the safety certificate. But I love the stadium. I've got family. I've got tickets there. Unfortunately, I've not been able to go. A bit of illness cost me going for the Fulham game, and then I was meant to go against Arsenal, but then Leeds' game against Palace got moved to that same night, so I couldn't go. So the first time we'll go probably will be for Leeds, and that's why we sort of released the story this week in the build-up to this game. So so really looking forward to going and seeing it on a proper night. I think one of the sad things, Everton have had so many games on a Monday night that I think it does affect the atmosphere a bit. And this game would be brilliant on a Saturday night or a Friday night even, which aren't ideal, I know. But I think Monday nights have and maybe that's been one of the reasons why they've maybe struggled to, really make it a smooth transition in terms of winning performances. Obviously they're going to win away at Villa last week, but it hasn't been plain sailing at home so far. But it's been an okay, season, and probably one that it's probably been better than I expected from an Everton point of view, because they look like at times they could threaten the lower sort of European places. Under Moyes, they've definitely shown steady progression, but as we've seen it, moving to a new stadium isn't always easy, is it? When you look at West Ham with the biggest example, and everything that goes with it. So, but I do hear good things though, Steve. The noise inside it when it is rocking and stuff, and it was needed. I think people, yes, you get very dewy-eyed about Goodison Park, but it was needed. And because if they're going to try and compete, then like Leeds, you've got to develop your stadium and move your stadium. To keep up. You think Spurs are, doing £5 million on match day revenue alone. And I think last year Leeds was about 1 million, say. That was just a few years ago when I was told this. Then, you're already behind the 8 ball, never mind without your TV revenues and everything else.
Yeah.
So it has to happen. And I think most people felt, certainly with Everton, that it's been a good thing. It's stayed in the city, it's on the banks of the Mersey, all that sort of thing. And from a Leeds point of view, redeveloping a cracking stadium is great. That they're not moving. They've just got to make sure they get it right, haven't they, to protect the unique atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely, indeed. And obviously Leeds' season, I think it's gone about as well as a Leeds fan could hope. I'm absolutely buzzing with the situation at minute 1, loss in 10, and that was an unbelievable game, really, where we should have probably walked away with all 3 points. I mean, Farker, it felt like he went right to the brink before that Man City game. Even during that Man City game, I think at half time, it felt like the writing was on the wall a little bit. But the turnaround since then, and I feel like we didn't fully get our just rewards even before that Man City game. I felt there were games we were competitive in where we dropped points against Bournemouth, Spurs at home. Even the Villa game, I thought we were good for a point, and it didn't really happen. But now we're on this run where we're picking up points regularly. The confidence is growing. We've now added Buonanotte to the squad. I mean, it feels in probably just your dream kind of place at the minute as watching Leeds.
Yeah, it's to see it evolve and the whole thing evolve, and to see Daniel Farker evolve.
Yeah,
has been great, because that was a sort of career enhancing, it's not defining week, was what he did after that Man City half time. Once you saw that, you thought, wow, okay. You're thinking, is it going to be a valiant defeat against Chelsea and Liverpool to follow, and then he'll lose his job, which I think everybody was expecting that would be the scenario. But the fact that he went toe-to-toe and started pulling off these results and adapting everything has shown how much that he's grown as well. And just, how good a coach he is to maximise, limited resources, you have to say, Steve, compared to most other clubs. And the injuries have been pretty, I think pretty onerous this season. Yeah, I mean, obviously the Stack and Beal just on Friday ahead of the most recent victory, but throughout there's been players have been missing, and or either that, or there's always a suspicion that they are going to maybe break down. So I think he's managed resources brilliantly, and I think you're right. This is a great moment to be a Leeds fan, because everything seems to be in sync. Everybody's talking about all the other clubs and losing their heads over their managers, etc., or their owners, whereas this has been relatively calm, certainly from a Leeds United point of view. And I love seeing the adaptability of the team, seeing different things happening on the pitch now, and the choices that he's got. And Buonanotte, I think, is something that he's chased, or not just someone, but a position or a type of that he's chased for a couple of years. And if you think about it, Steve, now you add that into that window. If that had happened at the end of the window, there would have been none of this, great window, bad day on the last day of the transfer window. They've now actually done it. They've got everybody they wanted, pretty much, haven't they? And for the most part, I mean, I know we haven't seen Buonanotte play yet, but for the most part, it's been a really successful recruitment policy. I think I said 7 out of 10 originally, but you've got to be moving upwards with that at the moment, because of the the performances of most of the players that have come in have probably exceeded expectations.
Yeah, indeed. On the transfer front, then obviously a few links floating around Romano Schmidt, Strand Larsen. Anything you're hearing, or what do you expect the club to do a bit more business?
Well, my thoughts were that they might do a couple of loans this month and try and keep hold of everybody else.
Yeah.
The Strand Larsen thing is really interesting. We saw him sort of coming back from injury when Leeds won down at Molineux, and then actually saw him a few nights later in the League Cup, where Wolves went much better than they had been against Leeds, and they were poor, but Everton were even worse. And Strand Larsen played a bit, and that's all. But he just looked like a player that was struggling to get back, to fitness. So maybe it's harsh for me to judge him on that. But when I thought Newcastle were, being rejected for £50 million in terms of the summer, then I'm thinking, well, is he anywhere near that? And even now I'm thinking, well, Wolves say they don't need to sell, but of course he's going to be in a side that's going to go down. So it's going to force their hand, I would suggest. But would I say, is he worth 40 million plus? can Leeds structure a deal to do that without selling somebody? And I think it's quite hard to see how it happens in terms of PSR and the restrictions without losing somebody, or certainly by June the 30th. And it sort of flies in the face of what we were feeling or thinking, or what we'd heard in terms of them recruiting. So look, if they can go and do it, I think it's a nice to have, but just my personal view, I'd need to be convinced that he was worth, sort of 40 million plus, to be quite, because that's a big gamble, because you're not just buying obviously to keep you up, but with that you're buying for going forward as well. And I know, look, his agent's a big Leeds fan, and he was there the other day and all that sort of stuff, but and there will be competition from it, as we know. I mean, West Ham, although that doesn't look very appealing at the moment, despite their victory of the day. But if a competitor comes in and can structure a deal that's sort of top heavy, if you like, or front ended, then that's going to make it difficult for Leeds. But the fact that they're inquiring about it suggests that they are serious. They're not just picking the phone going, "Oh, is he available?" Right, yeah. It shows that there's a shift in Leeds' position in the market, definitely. And how much more desirable they are to come, because they've done so well this season to get them into a position where it suggests that they're going to be safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much for that. I think what I'm going to do is put on, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's an old VHS, and it's Leeds Glory Years, 1965 to 1975. It's narrated by John Motson. I used to watch it all the time. Absolutely brilliant. So I think it'll probably be on YouTube now, so I'm gonna have to dig that out. But yeah, I'll be giving that a watch later. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Absolute pleasure. Hopefully speak again soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.